Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Perspective Shift with me, Colby Martin. In a bit, I'm going to be joined. Look at this. Look at this screen. Look at these people on the screen. They're wonderful. We've got Lauren Moser, we've got Tommy Allgood, and we've got Mira Sawlani-Joyner coming at you live here in just about 15-20 minutes on Perspective Shift. And fun fact, I've been threatening to change the name of Perspective Shift for a while now, and it's going to happen. I think next week might be the debut of the newly titled Wednesday at 2 p.m. live experience with me. But I'm not quite ready to tell you what it's going to be called yet, but I'm very excited about it. But anyway, today's topic we're going to do one more time. I'm going to talk a little bit about this book, The Shift, Surviving and Thriving After Moving from Conservative to Progressive Christianity. And today I'm just calling it, thank God for the faith shift, man. Thank God. I'm also drinking a smoothie that I made earlier, chocolate, peanut butter, banana protein shake. Not that anybody asked, but I wanted you to know that that's what I'm doing with my life in this moment. Let me know what you are currently drinking and or eating, if anything. I guess it's different times. We've got East Coast people, so maybe you're munching on dinner. We've got UK people, so maybe you're having breakfast. No, it's not that. I think it's just like late, but not like that. Anyway, welcome to Perspective Shift. For now, it's what it's called. Glad you're here. This is fantastic. We've got Connie from Ventura in the house. Hello, Connie. Glad you're here. I'm just going to sort of reposition these where they might make a little more sense. Connie, I see you're watching on YouTube, which is great. If anybody else is watching this on YouTube, either now live or later, and you want to hit subscribe, it's totally optional. You can do it. And I invite those of you on YouTube to do that. If you're watching on Facebook, you can also click like on my page. And these are just little ways to let me know that you're out there, and so that platform will let you know when I'm going live. Brooke says that I'm making my dog walk double as long as trying to catch up with all your talks. Oh, I'm making your dog walks double as long. Nice, because you're trying to catch up with all my talks. So what you're saying, Brooke, is that I'm long-winded. You're not wrong. I do tend to talk longer than is necessary. One of my life mottos is, why use 10 words when 50 will do? So that's me. Junior's in the building. Hello, everyone. Hello, Junior. Hi, Donna. Glad you're here. Phil, you finally got your copy? That makes me really happy. I hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed at least half as much as I enjoyed writing it, which was a lot. Really enjoyed writing that one. Connie's enjoying a vegan salad. It sounds really, really healthy. Haley picked up some fast food, a mushroom Swiss burger and Werner's. I believe Werner's is a ginger ale that is popular in the Midwest, I think. So Haley, are you in the Midwest? Oh, we got Finland in the house. Hello. Oh, it's Hanu Oksanen. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing your name right. It's really good to have you here. I love the things you have to share, Hanu. Oh, she says from Michigan, so I think I was correct. I think Michigan is technically in the Midwest. We've got Springfield, Missouri in the house with some vegan water. Wait a minute. Are you being cheeky? What is vegan water? Hello, John. It's good to see you. I'm glad you are here with us, one of our Wednesday afternoon regulars. Well, Werner's is originally from Michigan. That's awesome. And James is going to grab some Dr. Pepper. I haven't had a Dr. Pepper in a really long time, so enjoy one for me. Glad you're here with us today. I'm going to, here in a minute, share a bit of an excerpt from the closing chapter of The Shift, as well as just some kind of thoughts about this journey, this process of shifting, of moving away from or leaving, for some people being kicked out of our more conservative and or evangelical communities. And in the closing chapter, which I call Stay Open, my friends, my invitation is to have an appreciation for the fact that it was openness in many ways, this posture of openness that allowed or empowered or created the space for us to shift in the first place. As we were open to the possibility of new ideas, open to the possibility that maybe what we'd always thought about something is needing of rethinking. And yet I end the book by saying, my hope is that you would continue to stay open. Because the point here is not to just tear down the Jenga tower of our old system and then rebuild another one and be like, cool, now I've got this new thing that I'll say is all figured out. No. Like, the point here is that transformation and movement and growth, like, sort of is the point. Someone on my Instagram today commented and I don't think was being super charitable in their comment, but that's fine. That happens from time to time. And they're like, well, do you think that you, like, when you preach, or when you talk about this stuff, do you assume that you still could be wrong? I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Like, that's what I'm saying. Ask my church for 7 years now. I've been like, y'all, I could be wrong about this stuff. Like, don't just trust me because I'm saying it. My assumption is I'll be different 1, 2, 3, 5 years from now as well. So I didn't appreciate the implication that I'm like, but I want you all to change, but I think I've arrived. No, I have not arrived. This is a posture of openness that I am trying to perpetually hold to, even if I do it incredibly imperfectly, which is often. Hey, Jesse, a wizard is never late, nor are they early. They arrive precisely as they mean to. So welcome, Jesse the Wizard Hawkins. We got Odette coming in from Puerto Rico. Glad to have you here, Odette. Also glad to have you. Okay, we went back to the vegan water that was not extracted from animals. I'm glad we've got this all figured out here, people. Vegan water. Who are you people? Yes, John is correct. Change is a constant in our universe. So maybe we just say yes to it. Expect it. Enjoy it. Embrace it. All right, here's what I'm going to do now, which is how I often start out these Wednesday afternoon shows, is it's not scrolled up to the top. There it is. This is this morning's Perspective Shift article, which, by the way, is part of why I'm changing the name of the show, because Perspective Shift has been the name of my free newsletter that you can get by going to colbymartin.substack.com. And it just got confusing after a while to call my newsletter and my live show the same thing. So moving forward, to be clear, Perspective Shift is my weekly newsletter that you can get at this URL here. And today, the name of today's article is It Takes Real Faith to Doubt. It takes real faith to doubt. So I'm going to spend a few minutes here going through this with you. As always, I invite you to comment and or question if you would like in the comment section. I can see all of you here. And then when I'm done with that, which won't be super long today, then we'll get to our guests, Tommy, Lauren, and Mira, and get to hear from them a bit about what their faith shifting experience has been like. So this is how this goes. And it begins like this, with a bit of a story. My friend's face beamed more than usual as he rushed over to share the news. Our church service had just ended, and while people milled about, catching up or stacking away the chairs, my friend gushed joy as he shouted over the house music. I knew how his parents had firmly disapproved of his coming out as gay years ago, making it clear that any future boyfriend that he had would not be welcome in their home. But that morning, my friend wept as he shared how his mom recently did an about-face. Not only did she express excitement to meet his new boyfriend, but she spoke of her desire to love and welcome him in the same way as she did her daughter-in-law. She's not fully affirming yet, he said, still smiling, but her feelings have totally shifted. Now, I share that story for two reasons. First, I'm sure that you have people in your life who cannot understand the shift that you've made, and who perhaps remain a source of distress for you. And you feel like this theological chasm separating you will never fully close, and it will forever impact your capacity for meaningful connection with them. Full disclosure, that might be true. That might actually be the way that it plays out. You might spend the rest of your days struggling to navigate those rocky waters. That is a possibility. But keep this in mind too. Remember that you, before you shifted, before you began a journey toward progressive Christianity, you likely never would have foreseen your own change coming either. I know that I did not. I'm like, nah, I got this evangelical stuff on lock. I ain't going nowhere. I ain't going to those crazy liberal side of the spectrum. Of course, I didn't see it as a spectrum back then. I saw it as in, out, right, wrong. But you probably never saw your own shift coming either. From your current vantage point, where you are now, you might reflect back and feel like, well, I just followed where logic and reason, where common sense led me. Like I just followed the logical path. But this, I would suggest to you, is faulty thinking. At some point in your life, you were carried away by a vision of a more expansive, generous, and compassionate approach to the world. And you just never really know when that same wind might animate someone else in your life. Yeah, the story might be that they never sort of move in the direction that you would like them to move. That might be the story. And also, maybe you never know when the same animating force that captured you, that enraptured your imagination, that caused you to shift, might grab a hold of their heart too. You never know what's going on in the hearts and the minds of those that you might assume will never change. But people do change. They do. You've changed. I've changed. Change does happen. So I challenge you, I invite us all to hold loosely our expectations for any future mindsets of those who are close to us. Hold those expectations loosely. I think the wisest move might involve choosing to trust that the God who whisked you and me along in our lives to where we are now is the same animating force that's present in all of our loved ones as well. And then the other reason why I share this story, and again, this is from the closing chapter of the book. The other reason I tell this story is because it reminds me that the head cannot go where the heart is unwilling. An emotional opening necessarily precedes an intellectual commitment to a novel idea. We think we are under the I would say, and we're under the faulty assumption that reason and logic just lead us to our convictions. No, I just follow where the data takes me. But the truth is, and we know this from research into this, we end up feeling a particular way first. Then we sort of retroactively find the evidence and the rationale to support it. Does that make sense? Many of us think that how we come to our convictions is that we think them and we sort of rationally get there. But really the way that the human being, the whole body of the human works is that we feel a certain way and then we figure out how to justify and rationalize it. Even though my friend that morning, who's shouting over the house music, was quick to point out that his mom wasn't yet theologically affirming of his sexuality, I affirmed the significance of her change of heart. That's something. She now at least possesses the potential to reassess her long-held views on faith and sexuality, which is something that she could not have done beforehand. And I suggest that an open heart opens the door for an open mind. All right, so that is one of the ways, I think that's how I open the closing chapter of the shift. And then I have this to say about it takes real faith to doubt. Oh, thanks, Mercy. The title, as you'll see here, if you haven't already read it, comes from Lloyd Gearing's book. John says, I think you're touching on grief. In my experience, grief is a repeating cycle. The goal is to return and maintain the acceptance section of grief. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yes, Mercy, I agree. The beauty of the shift is this posture of openness, humility, curiosity. These are all gifts that I have so thankfully accepted as a result of my shift, or maybe the things that led to my shift. I don't know, chicken and egg. All right, I go on to say this. For the past month, as you know, I've been reminding folks, and for some announcing, because they didn't know, that 1 year ago, my book, The Shift, was released into the world. And the book, as I mentioned a minute ago, closes by me inviting the reader to remain open to the possibility, actually the likelihood, I would argue, the likelihood that they will continue to witness transformation in their life. You see, just by evidence of reading a book like The Shift, or subscribing to this newsletter, or taking part in these live shows, I can tell that you are someone who sees the value in keeping an open mind, rooted in an open heart. If you've shifted away from your more conservative evangelical roots already, or if you're in the process of doing that, then you've already demonstrated a capacity to humbly accept that you might not have all the answers, that you might be wrong on some things, and that you might indeed have areas in your life where you can grow. I believe it takes great faith in order for us to doubt our faith. Great faith in the verb sense of being open and trusting in order for us to doubt our noun faith, sort of the things that we have come to believe. Here's this quote from Lloyd Gearing in his book, Reimagining God. Lloyd says, "Doubt is not the enemy of faith. Doubt's the enemy of false beliefs. Indeed, our entire catalog of assumptions and beliefs should be continually subjected to critical examination. And those that are found to be false or inadequate should be replaced by those that we find convincing within our cultural context. Yet expression or even entertaining doubt, as many of you, I am confident, can relate to, expressing or even entertaining doubt sometimes takes so much courage that we may say it takes real faith to doubt." I love that. Our entire catalog of assumptions and beliefs should be continually examined. If they end up being inadequate, we should update them or let them go. This, to me, seems both reasonable and wise. And yet, for many religious people, this process of examining is not only foreign, but it's feared. Instead, within many religious contexts, the holding fast to beliefs that are like critically unexamined, or maybe they're clearly at odds with other things that we know to be true about the world, holding fast to it is seen as like having great faith, steadfast faith. But I think Gearing is onto something when he says it takes real faith to doubt. So I want to thank you, readers and viewers alike, for returning to The Shift with me these past couple weeks. It's a book that I love, I'm proud of. I was delighted to get a chance to talk about it and write about it the last couple weeks. And thank you for many of you who shared with me some of your feelings and experiences of your shift. I cherish all of that, the emails and the Instagram messages and the comments on this newsletter. While I believe and am confident that The Shift can be helpful for those that are on this unique journey moving away from conservative and toward progressive Christianity, I also believe that the ideas and the values and the principles found in The Shift can be helpful time and time again, even as progressively minded Christians continue to grow and evolve. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just for this one journey. I believe that it is helpful for all the many sojourns that you will continue to experience in your life. The whole point is not just to create a new landing place, a new static destination by which now you should plant immovable roots and believe all these things now. No. I'm not just trying to encourage people to move out of Bakersfield only to then settle down in San Diego. Although, let's be clear, that would be an upgrade. What I'm trying to do is show how once you've courageously exercised your faith, because it takes real faith to do this, once you've exercised your faith in a way that Bakersfield is in your rearview mirror, you've left Bakersfield behind, no matter where the road takes you. What I'm saying is you may rest in the truth that you are okay. You may trust that you are loved by God. You may trust that getting the right answers or possessing correct beliefs, it's not the thing that's either going to cement you in God's good graces if you have it right, or remove you from God's graces if you're wrong. I completely understand. You might reach the Bay Area, to keep our metaphor going, and you want to just stop for a bit. Like, go for it. Enjoy the pier. Take in all the redwoods. Do that. Yes, the Bay's wonderful. If you want to stop there for a while, that's wonderful. Or maybe you go north and you discover that the Oregon coast, and you realize, man, my whole life people have been keeping from me the secret that the Oregon coast is freaking magical. Yeah, totally. Relax, settle in, kick up your feet. Yes. But whatever direction you go, the invitation is to remain open, to stay open. We understand that the same animating spirit of the divine that has taken us this far is not just now done with us. we must keep moving. Our souls must keep dancing. And all along the way, wherever our journey takes us, may we remember this, that it's love that matters most. All other things are passing away. Everything else will pass away, but love remains. Love never fails. And so may we seek love. May we be love. And may we rest in God's love. Amen. All right. Now, if you want to check out some of the awesome responses from readers from last week's article where I said, hey, tell me about what you love most about your new expression of faith or what you miss about your old faith. I highlighted some of those there. Again, you can go to colbymartin.substack.com to check that out. And then as you see here, hey, here in a minute, I'm going to bring on some friends, Mira, Laura, and Tommy. Okay. And then if you missed my previous discussions with Brandon Robertson a couple weeks ago, then Pastor Josh Scott 2 weeks ago, and then last week with Britt Lively, you can check all those out on my YouTube channel or the videos section on my Facebook page if you are on the Facebooks. All right, let's get rid of that. Okay. Before we go any further, I want to say a couple things. One is, if you are watching this for the first time, or maybe you've been watching for a while and you find yourself wondering, like, what is this platform that Colby uses for all of this shenanigans and tomfoolery? The platform is called Ecamm Live. And if you're watching on YouTube, I should have a link down below that you can check out Ecamm Live. If you're watching on Facebook, I will drop that link here in the description in a bit. But feel free to message me if you're ever curious about this platform and how it works and how to use it. And then secondly, let's see if I go to this scene. Is it here? Nope, it's this scene. Before any of you check out, if you want to come tonight, Dr. Tina Shermer Sellers is going to join the Kate and Colby show tonight at 7 p.m. So my wife, Kate, and I host a weekly podcast / live show on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific. And tonight we're joined by sex therapist and author, Dr. Tina Shermer Sellers. And she is just a hoot, and she's smart, and she's fun, and she's wise, and I can't wait to talk with her. So that's tonight. All right. Without any more further ado than what I've already done, I'm now going to invite you to join me in bringing on our guests for today. Thunderous applause for Lauren and Tommy and Mira. Hi, friends.
Hello.
It's good to see you again. I mean, we just chatted in the tech rehearsal, but I'm going to pretend like, oh, it's for the first time I'm seeing you. Thanks for saying yes to joining this invitation. As I have thought to myself, what if I brought the shift back for a couple weeks and just thought of an excuse to talk about it for a bit? That would be fun, and also a little bit indulgent, as many things are in life these days, a little bit self-indulgent. So let me get out of myself for a bit, because good God, I talk about myself enough. And let me bring on some friends who have gone through some of this shift experience and hear from them, because part of why I wrote the book is over the course of my ministry the last 7 years, I've heard so many stories of people shifting, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of common themes. There's a lot of, like, everything's unique, and there's some common themes that show up in some of this. And so that was why I was like, what if there was a kind of like a survival guide to at least help alleviate some, or just give people a heads up. Like, if you haven't experienced this obstacle yet, it's probably still coming. And so anyway, so thank you, Lauren and Mira and Tommy, for joining me today and being willing to go through these 4 questions that I've been asking our guests. Before we get to that, I wonder if we can just go around and we'll just go Lauren, Mira, Tommy in that order. Just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about, like, if your best friends were to say what you do in life, how would they describe what you do? Lauren, we'll start with you. Oh, I think did you mute yourself? It says guest has muted themselves. Try like clicking, unclicking on the little. All right, here's what we're going to do. Lauren, you're going to come right back on. I'm going to kick you off, and Mira, we're going to start with you. I told them all that this might happen, and it's fine.
This is making me nervous now. Can you hear me?
No nerves. That's all good. And yes, I can hear you.
Oh, so you can hear me. That's
yes.
Excellent. Well, okay. So I'm Mira Sawlani-Joyner. what my friends think I'm doing right now, honestly, I think they have no idea. They think I'm some like social justice warrior activist. And while a little bit of that is true,
Yeah.
I spend more time listening to other social justice warriors and kind of learning from them.
I
Yeah.
love it.
I'm at school, I'm in seminary, and I'm loving it right now.
Very cool. And you are like on the launch team for a new faith community out that way, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah. So I'm in Washington, D.C., also the occupied land of the Anacostan people. And I am with Tanetta Landis Aina,
Yeah.
who has launched a church here called Resurrection City, DC. And it's an amazing community. They're a
Wow.
very intimate community. And it's just a group of folks trying to reimagine what faith looks like
That's so
now.
cool. I love it. Thanks for sharing. Lauren, are you back?
I hope so.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. That's great. All right. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about how your friends would describe the work you do in the world?
Okay, sure. Well, I'm Lauren, and I actually work for an organization called Q Christian Fellowship. So that organization helps to cultivate radical belonging for LGBTQ people and allies specifically through resources, programming, events. So I'm kind of all things to all people in the Pauline sense, and maybe that's true of all people in the nonprofit sector. So I split my time between finance, programming, project management, anything that needs to be done for the day. So I kind of get to do a lot of different things. It's fun to like flex my theological muscles though on here because I don't get to do that every day. I get to live in spreadsheets. That's not as cool. So this is way more fun.
I think it's cool because every once in a while I have to do a spreadsheet and I feel so small and overwhelmed that then when I meet somebody who can do spreadsheets, I'm just like, you are incredible. How do you do this? So
it's the opposite. It's like swimming into the arms of Jesus. Just like, such peace in Excel.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Lauren. And then Tommy, how about you?
Hey, how's it going? Thank you, Mira, for leading in a land acknowledgement. My name's Tommy Allgood. My real name's Thomas Garvin, for those who are wondering. Is Allgood his real name? Because I always get that question. And I am from the Charlotte, North Carolina area, which is my family are descendants of enslaved people who have occupied, and we have settled in the Shigari and Chira tribe territory. And I think it's important, especially to lead off with these land acknowledgements. And as we think of what's going on in Palestine and connect that to how we shift in a progressive faith as well.
Yeah. Well said.
And what my friends would say about me, they would probably say I'm a really dynamic human. I do a lot of stuff. I am on the core team of With Collective, which is a collection of progressive churches, community activists, and empathy builders. I'm a breath of fresh air at times. I'm serious, I'm silly, I'm a deep thinker, all kinds of things. So I like to call myself a nerd, and I like to laugh about it.
Love it. Love it. All right, nerd. I'm going to throw the first question at you first. So the question is this. And Tommy, this is for you in case the nerd comment didn't come through. What was the hardest part of your shift? So when you think about your movement away from something and towards something, what was the hardest part for you?
Probably the hardest part for me is that it wasn't a shift. When I think about a shift, this sort of you move or inch over a little, it was more like this earthquake that, swallowed me, shook me. And I tie that back to when I was younger. I was always told that if you went down this pathway, especially being a queer non-binary person, that the world would chew you up and spit you out. And for me, the hardest part is realizing that that's absolutely true. And it's not true for the reasons that I thought it would be true.
Yeah.
Right. It is contextualizing the fact that we commodify everything under a capitalist, consumerist society that's deeply patriarchal. And so it doesn't make space for a person that inhabits a queer body like myself. And so Adrian Ree Brown often talks about in her book Pleasure Activism about how we use language, and I would even say that clinging to a label such as like progressive Christianity could be difficult because humans are generative, and we're generative out of our experiences, and so connecting that back to the hardest part of that is breaking those cycles of shame and of non-belonging, but also finding joy in non-belonging, which is sort of how the queer body creates rupture in spaces.
Yeah. I love that. Thanks for sharing. That's a really great answer. Like, the hardest part is that it wasn't a shift. The shift sounds subtle and maybe a little bit gradual, and it wasn't. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Lauren, how about you? What was the hardest part for you in your shift?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I think for me, it was a little bit more, well, it was both subtle and jarring at the same time. I will say that, in the sense that I grew up Southern Baptist. I spent most of my 20s in the evangelical church. I volunteered almost exclusively and went to evangelical churches, and eventually felt the call to full-time ministry. Moved down to Texas, did my MBA, went to seminary. And it was really that first year of seminary, even at a relatively conservative institution, that it just kind of started breaking things apart for me, whether that was around just the role of women as a whole, the role of queer people within the church. And those conversations started chipping away at relationships that I had with previous friends and family members. And I noticed those fissures start to happen in those relationships. And then 2016 happened, and the election happened, and that just like, it went from cracks to potholes pretty quickly. And so those conversations that were always, and those thoughts that were always latent and under the surface, surfaced very quickly. And I watched more people kind of drop off or steadily distance themselves from me. And then I came out a couple of years later, and that was really the last straw for a lot of individuals. So at that point, you start with this really robust and beautiful community. And I think evangelicalism and just fundamentalist religion as a whole can do that really well, because a homogenous viewpoint can really breed this like really impressive loyalty and community group that you have. And then as you slowly start to question that and slowly start to think through, well, what do I believe? That starts to erode. So you start with all of these people who are for you and with you, and it gets quieter, and there's fewer people as you go along. And you wonder, like, am I going to end up totally alone at the end of this? Like, is there anybody going to be standing with me? And will it all be for nothing? Because at the end of the day, I'm wrong. So the hardest part ultimately was that sense of, how many more people who I love am I going to lose? Not because I have lost my affection for them, but because they were unable or unwilling to follow me in my own journey.
Yeah, that's so hard. I wonder, I'll throw this question to you, and then I'd love to hear Tommy and Mira, just quick response. You mentioned the 2016 election. I wonder for you if that felt like a whiplash to, holy crap, I thought that evangelical Christianity was about a particular thing, and now suddenly it feels like it's complete inverse, which was my experience. Or more like my wife, who has shared that for her, it was less about a whiplash and more about like a pulling back of the veil of like, yeah, that's kind of what I always thought was there. And it was more like this apocalyptic revealing of what her sort of experience within evangelicalism was like all along. I wonder if your experience was sort of either one of those more than another.
Yeah, I would say for me anyways, it was that slow pulling back of the curtain of just like kind of ignoring a lot of red flags for a very long time, up until the point where it's like, it's just a sea of red flags. And at that point you have to decide what you're going to do with it. So I think it was gradual in a sense. And again, it's that boiling point. You don't know that you're in hot water until it's boiling over. And then you're just like, oh, we're doing this now. Okay, good to know. And maybe that was my own naivete in that respect. So
Tommy, Mira, either of you have an experience with the that sort of 2016 election and the way the evangelicals kind of revealed themselves? Was that a whiplash, or was that yeah, that checks out? That's sort of a clear version of what I always suspected.
I'm going to let Tommy answer this one.
Perfect.
Are you sure?
Yeah, because so like I'm an immigrant, and so like politics is my relationship to politics here is still very, very new. So, but I think what Tommy has to share would probably be more relevant. Go ahead.
I mean, I would also love to hear your experience from an immigrant perspective. I think there's so much value there, even from we're friends, y'all, so like we get to talk offline here. But for me, it was. I don't know if if you had to be under a rock if you were not there for the events that created the uprising surrounding George Floyd's death. And one of the common refrains was, "It's about time. It's always been this way." And so I think where some people saw the rise of Trump as this shocking and surprising thing, people who are of marginalized identities and who have been the least of these already knew that there was something insidious in terms of evangelical Christianity that goes not just to theology, but is also tied to the inception of the United States of America and how theology has tied itself, married itself to the church and to politics.
Yeah. I love that you pointed that out. And that's what I had to confront. I'm like, oh, part of the reason why it was such a whiplash for me is because the frickin' system worked so well for me. So I thought evangelicalism was a particular thing because it was sort of built in my favor. And so, of course, I saw it in one way that then felt like a whiplash betrayal when it became what it seems so clearly now. And then my wife and others are like, yeah, that's because your experience within the thing was so like bent for your favor. Others had a very different experience in which was more easily brought to the surface and revealed, but it was there all along. Before I move on from that question, Mira, did you want to respond? Otherwise, I'll respect that you wanted to pass on that. It's totally fine.
Oh, just that I moved here 8 years ago. So our perception of the United States is that everything is better, that everything is, I've experienced racial injustice, racial oppression, but I always thought in the US they're in a different place. They've moved on from this. And then to come here and see that that's not in fact true at all was a shock to me, because I had always thought, oh, they've got it together, there's so much more advanced when it comes to things like this, but they, in some ways, they might even be worse off than where I've come from. Yeah. So yeah, that was my view.
Thanks for sharing. All right, put that question away. And Mira, we're just going to stick with you with question number 2 here. What's been the most surprising when you think about your faith shift? What's something you didn't see coming? And this could be surprising good. This could be surprising bad. This could just be like, whoa, I just did not see that coming when you sort of left this more conservative world and found yourself moving towards something more progressive.
Well, like Tommy and Lauren had shared, my experience wasn't quite a faith shift either. Mine, if I could, I think in pictures, and if there's a picture of my faith journey, it looks like a spiral going upwards. So the surprise for me was returning back to who I was, like who I've always been, really, and realizing that my upbringing, my culture was already pretty progressive as it was. And it was the church that kind of undid a lot of that. Yeah. I grew up in a multi-faith home. And so being tolerant or accepting of other faith beliefs was completely natural. And learning that from one another was normal. I also grew up in a mixed race home. So we had to, I'm mixed race. I embody the tension of races being opposed to one another in some ways. So we have to, in a family, negotiate that already. So parts of progressive Christianity was already evident in my home, but then when I converted, what I converted, I was less than. As a woman, I didn't have a voice. As a person of color, I wasn't experienced enough in my faith. I didn't have a well-developed faith. So what's been surprising is going back to my rituals, going back to traditions from my father and my mother. My father practiced yoga, and not this exercise yoga that America has popularized, but deep meditation and contemplation, which is in Christianity. So I returned to those practices, and my mother would take me to faith healers, and that this was often demonized in the evangelical church, but going back to seeing how faith healers would use local herbs for healing and say prayers over me, calling on ancestors and the wisdom of our ancestors for my healing, was profound. That these things already existed. They were already part of my identity, were already progressive in a sense. So that was a real surprise, and seeing that God isn't in just the evangelical church alone. God is actually everywhere, and seeing an expression of God from, I know your wife Kate would appreciate this, but seeing an expression of God in watching Moana with my daughters.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
write like a whole theology paper on that.
So good.
And then seeing a completely different dimension in this song that came out that was fully controversial, the Lil Nas X song, Call Me By Your Name. Like seeing God revealing themselves through this song, and seeing God moving. That aspect of faith was surprising to me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, Mira. Lauren, what about you? What kind of stands out as surprise? What surprised you in your shift?
Yeah, I love what Mira said. And I think so much of that resonates with me in the sense of, I think there's so many aspects of especially marginalized identities that just get pushed down and down and down until it finally feels like you just can't trust yourself. And the aspects that make you unique and make you in the image of God are detriments or dangers or perceived dangers to the church itself. And I similarly, I mean, I never ascribed to a really legalistic fundamentalist perspective. I was the kind of kid in college who was going to drink a beer before worship practice, much to the horror of my friends. But I mean, I had so many questions, so many feelings of just like, why are we doing these things the way that we are? And then to have people repeatedly tell you, well, this is the way it should be. And maybe it was just especially my queerness that I don't even think I knew or understood at the time, or wasn't allowed to really even explore, that just kind of kept driving me. And then at the end to say, and I say the end, like there's an end, there's not, we're all in process. But coming back similarly to this place of like, oh, I really wasn't so far off with who God made me to be. And there's nothing intrinsically wrong or broken with me. And just because I have found this peace that surpasses all understanding in who I am, doesn't mean that it's wrong. And people can tell me that all day long, but it doesn't make it true.
Yeah. And they do. They like to tell you that it's wrong, huh? They like to try to convince you that what you know in your bones to be real and good and true is wrong. And damned if there aren't moments where we're like, maybe they're right, because we've been so conditioned in that way, especially if like was true for me at a young age. So I'm learning things about religious truth at the same time that I'm learning things like 2 + 2 = 4 and the sky is blue and the earth revolves around the sun. So the brain just takes all this and puts them in the bucket of things that are true about the world, not realizing that one day the religious truths might, alter a little bit. So then when they do alter a little bit, all my body and brain knows is like, nope, that is going against what is true. And then that gets confused to be like, maybe that's the Holy Spirit convicting me. It's like, no, it's just that sometimes it takes a while to detach. My therapist says to record new tapes over all those old tapes. That can take a while.
Right.
That can take a while.
Yeah. It triggers a fight or flight response. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Adette thinks that this is awesome. She says, thank you. Thank you, Adette. We appreciate you. Tommy, what about you? What's something that stands out to you, like what surprised you in your not subtle shift, in your earthquaking shift? Oh, I lost your sound.
Probably
Okay.
because I had it on mute. So
I'm just glad it was on your end, but makes it easier.
Yeah, my apologies. I
That's
would
okay.
say probably the most surprising thing, not so surprising anymore, it is the cyclical nature once you open this pathway up. And so we're always returning back to it. It reminds me of the seasons, right? We go through these seasons of birth and death, and in that, a couple of the observations that I've made is that there's a danger tied to sort of the evangelical culture and how it views individualism, because it supports this culture of commodification in me first, and roots into this notion of self-love, which I believe in self-love, and I think we're called to love ourselves deeply, because if we don't love ourselves deeply, how can we love others well? But when we root into this particular type of individualism, it disconnects us from functioning as a collective. And I love that in African American studies, one of the ways of it talks about ways of knowing. Some people might know that as epistemology, but we ask these questions of what are our ways of knowing. And a stringent faith says that there's one way of knowing and discards all the rest. And what it has us doing is commodifying and telling other folks' stories in ways that are not true at their expense, that silences and erases and inflicts more wounds. And in the process, we're actually hurting ourselves. And so at seeing that cycle play over and over and over, and seeing how these things are embedded in me, and I have to dismantle and divest from these things in my body, because it's the water and the cultures that I swim in. Like white supremacy culture is the waters that we swim in, and it embeds itself into all these structures. I think that's been the most surprising for me, because I think we get taught and indoctrinated in schools and churches growing up. These things happened and then things ended, but we don't really interrogate, well, how have these things carried on and hidden themselves and replicated themselves? And so, and for guests here, when we think about, again, going back to the Palestinian conflict and settler colonialism, when we think of whiteness, and that makes some people go, ooh, right? Because they might think, oh, whiteness is my skin color, instead of whiteness as an ideology of domination that all of us, as especially U.S. American citizens, have to deal with in our imperialistic culture. So I think those have been some of the most surprising things for me that I continue to wrestle with.
Yeah, well said. I'll just do this. I'll stick with you, Tommy, and then circle back around. What about what's something that you identify, like, what are you grateful for when you think about this movement, again, away from I can't remember for you how much of your past was in the evangelical world, but if what are you grateful for as you think about?
I grew up with Witness, so.
Okay, cool. So it's a type of conservatism, but not super evangelical. But what are you grateful for when you think about that? You're not where you used to be. You are where you are now. What comes up for you is like, oh man, I'm really grateful for that.
I'm grateful. I'm going to say it like this, that I'm grateful for the lessons of suffering that I've learned in my queer body. And I use queer intentionally to be disruptive. It can be a disruptive word for people, but when we begin to break down what the queer body does is it disrupts. It is seen as strange. And even in saying relating to suffering in that way is almost a privilege because I've had reprieve from my sufferings. And so for me, it's a privilege in some ways to be able to say, to be grateful for my suffering when I think about my disabled siblings, right? And so there's this coming into knowing by being liberated to be in my body, to break away from normativity culture, because that's what we get indoctrinated in these institutions of this is the way to be normal, this is the way to fit in, this is the way to belong. And my friend David Roberts, who also is a pastor at Watershed, we talk about, well, what if the actual key is this universal non-belonging, to problematize that language of creating this in-group and out-group thing. And so those are some of the things that I'm grateful for, because I don't think I would be able to think and contextualize in that way otherwise.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. Mira, what about you? What comes up for you when you think about something you're grateful for?
Well, in my faith journey, I'm grateful that I know now how I'm supposed to read the Bible, that it's a deeply contextual text. And because of that, I'm able to see how people grew, a community of people grew to understand who God was and is. And so from that, and then even how faith has evolved since then, understand how different expressions that have come through have been ways in which people have tried to understand God. And I have more empathy for the writers of scripture who are speaking from a very specific perspective, because that was all they knew. And I can have more empathy even for the white leaders, white male leaders that pushed a specific expression of Christianity, because that's all they knew. That's that it's gonna it's gonna sound pretty harsh, but that's a way of acting out of their own insecurity, the need to control everyone else's expression and need for everyone to look and be the same as them so that they could be at the top. So I can have more empathy towards other people's journeys, because I understand now how scripture is so contextualized, and I can see where our experiences come in. My experience as a woman is God. It's divine. It's I'm losing all the words. This is what happened. But that's what I'm grateful for, seeing God moving in everyone and everything, and being able to embrace it all. It's hard.
Yeah.
But to have just that grace.
Yeah.
To be able to do that.
I love that, Mira. Is there anything more boring than the idea that the Bible is just this sort of static, detached from time, objective set of timeless truths? Like, that bores me to death. But then when you start, the gift of reading it, maybe I would boldly say reading it for what it is, right? Which is this, I talk about this hard-earned collection of insights into what it means to be alive, what it means to be human. How do we relate to each other? How do we figure out who God is? And I don't know, once you see once you get a permission to read it in this way, just for me, it's a way more interesting document.
For what it is, but even what's unsaid, for looking for the stories that are not told, looking for what's said between the lines, and even understanding that it's a living, breathing document, and it lives through me too when I read it through my own personal hermeneutical lens.
Love that. Thank you, Mira. Lauren, what about you?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, what I'm most grateful for is moving away from theology as absolutes, as a data set, as preset algorithms and moving towards theology as theory. And if the theory doesn't work, don't use it. And I think it's on two different realms. I think both metaphysically and physically, and Tommy pointed to a lot of this as well. In terms of, from a metaphysics perspective, I was constantly panicked that if I was doing something wrong, someone was going to hell. If I wasn't doing enough, someone was going to hell. If I did too little, whatever, I was going to go to hell. Someone was going to burn in the lake of fire at any given moment.
It always seemed to go that way, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, at a certain point, being able to open that up into theory, it's equal parts scary and equal parts liberating, in the sense that now you have opened yourself up to this realm of possibilities, and you've broken out of these confines that have said, you can't go any further than here. The walls are this big. You have an 8x8 room, and now you have just free range, an open park, essentially. And again, that can be scary, but at the end of the day, it's really beneficial to especially take a good look at what are we doing with our theological praxis on a day-to-day basis. Are there empirical statistical numbers to say this theology is harmful for these particular people, and we need to address it, and we need to do something about it? If it's bearing bad fruit in today, we need to do something about it. And the metaphysics, we can wax poetic all day long about what happens after death, but what can we do today to make heaven as real on earth as possible? How do we seek justice today? So being able to open that up from just, well, the Bible says, and I was told this, and really being able to intellectually engage with our biblical text and being able to think about it critically was really what I'm most grateful for.
So good. So good. Thank you. All right. Let me throw that question away. We did that already. We've got it's 3:00. I usually try to wrap this up at 3, but I'll give it a last couple minutes here because I want to get this last question in. And Lauren, I'll throw it right back to you. Then we'll circle back around. What do you love about your new faith? And, or if you want to wax poetic, is there something you miss about your old? And that might be a vulnerable share. You don't have to, but what do you love about your new and or miss about your old? And Lauren, we'll go back to you.
Sure. I think it dovetails with what I just said. Those absolutes are so comfortable. They're so nice. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to quickly answer existential questions without having to say, maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe at the carrot at the end of the theological stick doesn't even exist. So again, some pretty concerning things to have to think about. I think ultimately, even though it breaks open your certainty in terms of what happens to me in the afterlife, is there an afterlife? Is there one particular religion that is truth? I can't empirically prove that. I can't, from an apologetic standpoint, be like, it is because of this, this, and this. And that's hard. But on the flip side of that, again, at the end of the day, I get to say, well, maybe the gospel really is good news for everyone. Yeah. So I can dabble in even more wholesale heresies at this point, which I'm happy to do.
Wholesale heresies.
But yeah, I think that's probably the toughest part, is being honest with yourself to say, what if faith really is hoping for things that are unseen, and all you have is that hope, and you can't prove it, but it's worth holding on to because it's so compelling and so powerful. So I hope that answered your question.
It's great. It's great. Tommy, what about you? Is there something you particularly love about your new expression of faith and or miss about your old?
I'll say that I love it very much in alignment with Lauren. I love that I'm beyond apologetics, honestly. And I think that's where we're being called into. I love that I'm able to contextualize scripture as story, as tall tale, as legend, as narrative, and begin to look at it not as this text to be feared, but this text to be embodied, and recognize that I have a place as one being in the imago Dei, right? That I have a place in this text, in this time, and that God is revealed in me and in my body, and how I'm in relationship to other bodies, right? And with that comes the grief of loss, because there's relationships. And so I'll say the thing that I miss the most is probably my mom, and the close relationship that we were able to have. But in that loss, I've been able to experience suffering, and a suffering that leads to hope and to liberation. And so even in that grief, there's freedom.
Thanks for sharing that, man. Mira, bring us home, friend.
Sure. What I love, like I said earlier on, the return to myself, being able to see that God has always been there, has always met me where I'm at, and coming back to reclaiming the parts of me that I just cut out for so long because it didn't fit in this vision of what it means to be an evangelical Christian. But what I miss is, and particularly because I went to churches where it was predominantly POC, is I miss, for better or for worse, the generosity of those churches, generosity in time and in resources. There were people in those churches who knew that I was just a young convert, and they embraced me as family, and I formed a lot of amazing relationships. But I find that here in the United States, even in progressive circles, I think this is this may be because of church hurt, that a lot of churchgoers have boundaries up, and there isn't a willing, the trust isn't there. There's still, and because this is the United States as well, is that progressive Christianity is still drenched in individualism. There's really no real care or concern for anyone outside of yourself. It's still a very much, self-care, being better, doing, making myself better. But what about what your contribution is to community? What about how we are linked to one another? Where is the concern for your neighbor? Where's the intention? When do you stop to think about how your actions impact on the people around you? And I don't feel like that's said enough in progressive circles. We're still so bound up in undoing all our inner damage that we're not thinking about how even that process of undoing can harm the people around us.
Wow.
And often it's the most marginalized that we are still continuing to harm in our process of deconstructing.
You three are awesome. Oh, go away question. We've sufficiently done you. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for yourselves. Thank you for showing up. I've never had so many positive comments in the stream, mostly because they're stuck with me, that gets old after a while. But this is, like John says, these are terrific conversations. I'm grateful to witness and participate in these talks. Melissa, preach. Thank you. Susan, wow, thank you. It's a joy. It's a joy to share this space with you. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for rolling the dice on a relatively unknown, especially you, Lauren, because we didn't meet till about an hour ago. And Tommy and Mira, we've only had a few interactions. So it really means a lot to me that you said yes. You all...
Oh, Colby, there was one of your commenters that mentioned something about just learning now how to pick up the Bible again. And I do want to say that with Collective, which Colby is also affiliated with, we are currently in a 3-week series about what do we do with the Bible in a progressive context.
Yeah.
And you all are invited to that free of charge. This week I will be anchoring it with Josh Scott.
Oh,
and
sweet.
Next week it'll be Josh and Mira. And last week it was Josh and Tonetta. And there will be videos posted. So I just wanted to let your community know about that and then invite them into that space as well.
Would you be able to drop a link to that in the Facebook, in this comment section, so that people who will watch it now or later, is there like a link to that?
I'll drop a link to the post, and then I'll have to send them a link to the
Gotcha.
Zoom meeting.
Gotcha. And then Lauren, I know earlier on in the broadcast, people were like, wait, what is this Q Christian Fellowship you speak of? It sounds amazing. So if someone can drop a link as well in the comment section, I should probably at some point have another computer to be able to drop links, but we're not there yet. But anyway, people, check out Q Christian Fellowship, check out With Collective. All three of you are doing really, really good, holy, and important work. And I'm grateful for you all. So thank you. Have good days and or nights, wherever you are. Bye, friends. Well, that was a freaking delight. Why did it take me so long to do that sort of thing? I'm going to bring friends on more often. Thank you all for being with us today here on, I think the last time it'll be called Perspective Shift. Once again, if you're watching on Facebook and you want to click like, that's awesome. And if you're watching on the YouTubes and you want to subscribe, again, you're more than welcome to do that. Don't forget that tonight, the Kate and Colby Show live on YouTube and Facebook, Dr. Tina Shermer-Sellers will be here. And I'm excited to talk with her about all these things. Yeah, y'all are good people. And we went over a little overtime today, so thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you, Susan. It's always so good. Brooke, I hope your dog walk went well. Yes, Odette is interested, so let's get those links in there for Q Christian Fellowship and the Zoom conversations with the With Collective. I agree, Phil. It was wonderful to hear everyone's unique perspective. Grace and peace to all. Be well. See you next week. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Perspective Shift. I'm going to now invite you to do one of three things, or do them all if you're an overachiever. First, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my free Perspective Shift newsletter. You can do that by going to colbymartin.substack.com. This will ensure that each week the articles that I write arrive safely in your inbox. Second, if you're watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and hit subscribe on my channel. That'd be awesome. And or if you're watching this on Facebook, would you click like on my page? For me, this is a win-win in that it helps me know that you're out there and that you care. Plus, it helps you know when I'm going live. For all my other work, including books that I've written or sermons that I've preached, head on over to colbymartinonline.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me live next week.